Hello and welcome to The Digital Insight, the technology, procurement and supply chain podcast that delivers valuable C-level perspective into the core issues surrounding business transformation and digital disruption. Each episode will bring you the most inspiring executive insights from those who are leading transformation strategies within the world's biggest and best-known companies. The Digital Insight. Disrupt, transform, evolve.
Welcome to the Digital Insight, the official podcast series for CPO Strategy and Interface magazines. Today we're joined by Laurence Parkes, CEO of digital experience agency Rufus Leonard. Laurence will be exploring differentiation with digital and the importance of designing your own digital ecosystem experience. Let's talk a little bit about you first. Maybe if you could just introduce yourself and your role at Rufus Leonard and just give us a little bit of an overview as to what Rufus Leonard does.
So I am Laurence Parkes. I am the CEO of Rufus Leonard. Been in the role for just over a year. Have to say it wasn't the end of the first year I had hoped for with everything that's gone on in the wider world. Prior to being CEO, I was Chief Strategy Officer. So my background has been in sort of marketing strategy from day one. For about 20 years, I was in advertising for my sins and sort of caught the digital bug about 10 years ago and realised that was an opportunity to use my skills to create things that people might value enough that they might want to buy, as opposed to mostly try to avoid, which was true of advertising. And so I started my long journey into kind of, I guess, service design. I sort of, before Rufus Leonard, I was at AKQA in Amsterdam, relatively well-known digital agency. But it was really interesting having experienced working at AKQA. We're fantastic at sort of digital implementation. But actually, unlike the ad agencies, didn't have the imagination to be able to define what a brand was about, as well as delivering it through digital experience. So when I was coming back to London from Amsterdam, I was looking for a company that had that mix of both the brand understanding that I'd experienced in ad agencies, but then the detailed sort of digital delivery that I'd experienced at AKQA. And I met the guys at Rufus Leonard and realised that they had the ingredients, but they just hadn't been able to pull these two bits together. So they were kind of describing themselves as the brand and digital agency at the time. And my observation to them was that kind of actually it's the future of marketing in my mind, and still to this day, is being able to combine those two bits. So understanding how a brand is, what a brand's point of difference is, and how it kind of resonates with its consumers, but then delivering that point of difference through digital.
What kind of brands are you working with at the moment then?
So we work with what we call sort of service brands, and they're some of the kind of best known sort of service brands in certain areas. So financial services, we work with Aviva, with Lloyds Banking Group, and a number of others. We also work with what we call scale-ups, kind of in the I guess hospitality area. So we have a client called the Student Hotel, who are a massively growing sort of hotel chain, student accommodation and hotels in Europe, and the Gym Group, who are a massively growing sort of low-cost gym. And what's interesting about sort of both the Student Hotel and the Gym Group is they the digital work that we do for them is sort of fundamental to how they deliver their value proposition to consumers. So, for example, on the gym, the platform that we've built for them and the experience that is enabled by that platform kind of enables them to deliver a good experience, but for the low cost that is their positioning in the market. So we're sort of we're kind of now increasingly picking up more of those kind of scale-ups where the platform is sort of central to the business.
And I guess there's a lot of enterprises, brands, businesses, if you like, which really haven't fully tapped into and unlocked a lot of the digital potential they have they?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's interesting. We are very aware, kind of from the fact that we have this brand sort of background, that there's been over the last kind of 10 years, I guess, a kind of rush to really simplify the experiences that consumers have, and make them as frictionless as possible, and apply sort of best practice from a end user point of view. But in doing that, and you could understand it because kind of prior to this drive, due to legacy systems, kind of often the digital experiences were really kind of convoluted and unintuitive. But in the drive to kind of simplify, often a lot of the elements that create that kind of point of difference, that kind of unique, I guess, personality of a brand, or kind of specific features that make a brand stand out versus competitors, have sort of disappeared. It's what Forrester called digital sameness, and they've identified it across a number of different markets. And we've sort of been quite highly sensitive to that, or tuned to that, and seen it coming. And so our intent is to keep, obviously, the experiences as intuitive for consumers, but allow at choice moments for the brand to come back in and deliver something different, and therefore kind of driving loyalty for consumers.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, it's integral in many reasons for brands to keep up with these kind of platforms and building a digital ecosystem. Mainly because they're just simply not going to survive, are they, unless they're keeping up with competitors. And
it's really interesting at the moment. So obviously, with what we've just experienced over the last 3 months, and obviously we'll continue to experience, that the kind of the understanding of how important it is to get those digital transformation sort of programs sort of either kicked off for those who are really slow, or kind of accelerated for those who have already started the journey, is just is just become very, very clear. Can't count the number of businesses that have realised they need a digital presence to be able to sell their wares online. Now they can't do it physically. So it's if any organisation was in doubt of the need to have a digital presence and you make use of these platforms, I think there'll be very few of them that do now.
And you touched upon there kind of some of the kind of pitfalls, if you like, and some of the sort of cul-de-sacs, that brands and enterprises can find themselves in. What other challenges do they face in terms of reaching their kind of digital potential, if you like?
So as sort of customers' expectations sort of grow, and the platforms that organisations need to use to deliver those experiences get more complex, I think there's a challenge for organisations to orchestrate the digital experience across multiple third-party and owned platforms. I mean, we've seen it kind of, I used to talk about it when I was in advertising, of how sort of media fragmentation was making it difficult to have consistency of message across all of the different, increasing channels that brands need to work on. But it's true also through digital experience and the platform fragmentation that kind of is happening. Obviously, you need multiple platforms to deliver the experience, but then you've got the problem of kind of, I guess, the making sure that they work nicely with each other and well with each other, and the gaps aren't revealed to the end user, I guess. So that's definitely an area, and there are kind of a number of sort of ways to solve that. But then also, increasingly, like the gym group, who, as I said, kind of their platform is the business, is the way that they deliver their value proposition. Increasingly, the business logic, the sort of the logic that kind of allows a business to deliver the value proposition, and also the data that it holds on its customers and the ways that it delivers kind of those unique experiences. Increasingly, that business logic is housed in these third-party platforms. So, if you're not careful, kind of you might have some sort of strategically important business logic sat in a CMS that you have no control over in terms of the development roadmap, or kind of whether they still exist as an organization. You might find kind of, if you're unlucky, that key parts of the way that you do business might disappear if that third party goes under. So there's a real challenge there for businesses, and I think increasingly there's an understanding that that business logic should be housed in systems owned by the organisation, so that there isn't that risk of it disappearing overnight should anything happen. The last area, which is a classic problem, and we've experienced this, this is arguably there are silos when you have more than two people in a room. But most organisations, however established or new, there will be fiefdoms and silos that can, from an end user point of view, from a consumer point of view, they don't care how you are internally structured. They just care they're getting an experience that is meaningful and relevant to them. But unfortunately, often those silos get in the way of delivering that kind of seamless experience for the end user. So, I know a major bank, not our client, where content is being created in multiple different places, and there's huge inefficiencies as a result of doubling up on work, a misunderstanding of the core strategy, sort of non-experts creating content outputs. And that's in a relatively simple thing in terms of content, but in something more complex like digital platforms, it can create even more challenges.
Yeah, certainly a lot of the business leaders I speak to, obviously a lot of the conversation revolves around overcoming these kind of legacy systems and siloed organisations. How do you, when you're faced with a new client or whatever, how does that process start in terms of you evaluating what's not happening and what should be happening?
It's a really good question, because we are at pains to effectively onboard clients when we start working with them. Even for projects that are might feel a little bit implementational to begin with. What we tend to do is we've got a process called business impact matrix, which really allows us to unearth across multiple stakeholders really what their agendas are, individually and collectively. And it's one of those things that it's a workshop basically, but the structured in such a way that you often see moments of revelation in these meetings where the different heads of a client organisation realise that they've got objectives that are at odds with each other, but they're all after an ultimate a top line goal for the organisation, but realise they're working against each other. So often just by airing those agendas and saying, look, it's helpful for us as a third party to get a sense of what you're all trying to do, you actually immediately start solving the problem for them by airing where those tensions exist. And obviously from an agency consultancy point of view, that's gold dust, hearing those agendas from the mouths of the people in charge, and that often will actually change the original brief, where we identify what the real problem is rather than what the problem is that they thought to put down in the brief to us, sort of thing. So it's something that we've evolved over time, and still continue to optimize our onboarding process. But that tool is a key element of it, really.
Obviously, a lot of the discussions these days will centre around customer experience, won't it? And even in areas which maybe traditionally wouldn't have crossed with digital technology. Customers now are expecting that same kind of experience and that same kind of journey, whether it's looking for a football result or whether it's buying some car insurance.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch how, and actually is still in the process, who within organisations owns the customer experience. So there's been a increase in people being chief experience officers or chief customer officers. We're fairly like to keep things simple, and think that really these new CXO or CCOs are really just newfangled ways of talking about the CMO. Ultimately, you've got a good CMO. They should understand the customer needs, and have all of that insight at their fingertips. The key relationship, as we see it, is that CMO relationship, understanding the person who is understanding the consumer as best as they can, and the CIO who understands the enterprise technology and is in charge of that, and bringing those two roles together, whatever they're called in an organization, we think is key. And it's interesting. I mean, by dint of us having sort of brand expertise historically and digital expertise, we sort of in different parts of the business can talk the language of the CMOs and the language of the CIOs. Often they don't talk the same language, and it's very difficult for them to actually work together as a result of that. Different agendas, kind of different language, etc., etc. And we're often that kind of synchromesh or translator between the two to help them kind of identify that the CMO is craving sort of to deliver experiences that their customers are after, and the CIO has got the access to the platforms that will enable it. So the quicker they can come together and the more seamlessly they can come together, the quicker that the customers will get the experience that they want. But it's fascinating to be the go-between between those two disciplines within organisations.
And also, I was quite intrigued by the reference to hero moments on the bottom line as well, and the blueprint that kind of outlines the impact of that. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, again, this is something that we've developed over kind of the last 5 years certainly, but it's really sort of identifying those moments along the customer journey where you might want to invest as an organization to create something that is distinct and more than just the frictionless kind of journey in other places. Because obviously, there are many moments in a customer's journey where they just want to do something really quickly, and they just want to get in and out and don't want to be bothered. But there are other moments in the journey where you have an opportunity as a brand to create something which is distinctive, which is unique, which ideally is memorable as well for the end user. So they consciously and explicitly say, I really like this brand because I get this experience from them, to the extent that they'll want to come back for that specific thing, but also hopefully talk to their friends and families about it and be the reason that they might advocate for the brand to other people. But obviously you don't want to invest in creating kind of that what we call hero moment, that kind of point of difference across every single touch point, because you'd be spending far too much money. So one of the things that we do as we kind of work with the clients is identify those moments along the journey where there's a pain point for a customer that they really care about, where you as an organization can solve that need, solve that problem, but do it in a way that is unique, and zero in on those moments and invest in those moments to drive the most value, both for the end user, for the customer, but also for the business. Because there'll also be amongst those hero moments which actually don't necessarily drive business impact in the short term, and you might still invest in those because they might drive brand equity in the long run. But ideally, you'd be creating hero moments that drive both the brand equity, the what people think of the brand, but also actually hard sales in the moment. So it drives conversion and gets people to either upsell, cross-sell, or buy again. So we'll be at pains about kind of, obviously, from a long list of potential hero moments that we've identified based on our understanding of the brand and the customer and the technology stack that the organization has, whittling it down to those where they really ought to invest, because it hits that sweet spot of important to customer, but impactful for the business in the long term and the short term.
Have there been any sort of particularly satisfying projects that you've worked on in terms of how you've been able to turn things around from a digital perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the Gin Group earlier. That I would say is one of the most satisfying, because the moment that was most satisfying was when they went to IPO in 2015. So we've been working with them quite a few years, and the work that we had done with them, so creating their experience services architecture, kind of a key part of their tech stack, in such a way that they owned the business logic. It was called out as one of the competitive advantages that they have over their key competitor, Pure Gym. So something that was kind of called out by investors as going, right, this is a key tranche of how they deliver their business. That was great. But then ongoing since then, because we've been obviously doing a lot since 2015 with them, the fact that we'd created this this, what we call it, an omnichannel experience API, but it's really kind of just a part of their tech stack that enables them to more effectively plug in new sources of customer data, and then plug out new interfaces for customers. So a good example of that, they about a year and a half ago put in some of their key most of their gyms, I believe, these FitQuest machines, which is basically a glorified weighing machine, but then tracks your body mass index and various other sort of things that you might want to track when you're training. And because we'd set up this system, they were able to extremely quickly, in a matter of weeks, enable the data that's being gathered by the individual into the system and out into their app, so that they could track how they were doing on weight and body mass index, et cetera. And it's because we'd set up the system that it was so easy to put these in and get them up and running really quickly. So we're sort of enabling them in a cost-effective way to drive that innovation and be able to continue to drive their differentiation versus their competitors. So it's almost that kind of like the hard graft of putting these things in place. You then see the clients, organizations benefiting them from them kind of in the long run. I guess that's one of the most satisfying things.
And obviously, because of where you're placed as a business, you're dealing kind of almost looking back historically at brands that need to catch up and need to kind of maintain their businesses with what's going on in the technological landscape. How do you see your role, or Rufus Leonard's role, kind of evolving over the next sort of year or so? I mean, can you see differences in the way that you will be operating and the work that you'll be doing?
Yeah, that's the big question right now, isn't it? I think the reality is every client organization needs its partners to be more flexible, even more flexible than they have in the past. And almost even more modular, because while the understanding of the importance of how a tech stack kind of delivers the desired customer experiences, even though the understanding for that is increased, budgets are going to be tight, and budgets are going to be heavily controlled. And every sort of investment will require a clear business case and visible ROI. And in that context, kind of, I think what we're certainly putting in place currently is enabling us to be more fleet of foot for our clients and deliver projects in a more chunked up way, if that makes sense. So I've been inspired by, there's a really high-end Japanese restaurant in Tokyo that, when lockdown happened, basically sort of could have stopped sort of innovating and seen the business decline, because they were kind of really high-end. It was all about the restaurant experience. And a meal there for two with wine, kind of, we're talking about sort of up to £1,000, sort of very, very high end. Now what they've done is go into bento boxes. Now these bento boxes still are hugely innovative in the way that they are kind of choice of flavors and ingredients, etc., and they're still really expensive. So we're talking about £100 worth of bento box, or an individual bento box. So they're keeping all of the things that are true of the brand in terms of being innovative, in terms of being luxury, but they pivoted into something that is better for delivery as opposed to the restaurant experience. And I'm sort of inspired by that, and that's the kind of what I'm imagining kind of Rufus will be doing more of. So keeping our upstream strategic kind of consultancy that clients look for us for, but enabling clients who need that flexibility to buy into that and get that in a more cost effective, but also a faster sort of sense. So it's almost wrapping up our strategic consultation into bite-sized chunks. how that will happen is currently live, right? but that's my vision for how things will change. The drive to be customer centric, and how that has kind of created these sort of this digital sameness, because everyone's chasing arguably the same customers and solving the same problems. And obviously trying to get the right balance and going, we still need to be consumer centric, but we also need to be brand led and technologically inspired. And it's getting the balance between those three things rather than just going hell for leather for the consumer centricity. And there's still a bunch of organisations that are behind the curve on the customer centricity. Really, a friend of mine is doing an executive MBA, and she was saying kind of most of the people on the MBA are saying we're still product and sales driven, not consumer centric. So there's still work to be done there. But as we focus on the consumer, let's not forget the organisation's kind of point of difference. That's really what we mean by brand. And the strategic assets that they have technologically and could have within reach, and it's combining those three things that I think is where the real value lies for organisations. And I think we try to reflect that internally. So we are proud to have on almost all of our projects a mix of strategists who kind of set up to understand, do the consumer research and understand the consumers, designers, whether they're UX, visual, audio, etc., and technologists. So kind of the blended team across those three areas, reflecting that consumer-centric but brand-led and technologically inspired.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Insight Podcast in association with the Interface.net and CPOstrategy.com. The Digital Insight is brought to you by B2E Media Limited. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate and review. And don't forget to check out our podcast archive at www.b2e-media.com/The Digital Insight.